all CEOs, me included, we don't actually know what we're doing.
They're all sharks, so all you got to do, though, is know shark behavior.
I don't think we've ever talked about this before.
We can capture all of the wallet share.
First place you start is with the product.
That's just the first note.
This is the Capital Stack. Hey everybody, this is David Paul, the host of the Capital Stack podcast, where I talk to founders, operators, and investors about all things value creations within startups. Today, I am speaking with Alex H, because I'm gonna butcher her last name. I should have gotten that before we started, but she is with Access Venture Partners out of Denver. I'm super excited. So I guess first question, Alex, how do you pronounce your last name?
That's a great question, and I'm excited to have this out on the internet.
Yeah,
it's Houghtalin.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I was gonna say like Houghtalin or something.
You would not be alone.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a very common mispronunciation. Yeah.
What else do you get?
Yeah, so Houghtalin is another. That's the other one. Yeah, but it's so much easier than all of those. It's just Hotel in.
Houghtalin. Yeah. I like it. Alex Houghtalin. Yeah. This is great. You should do one of those things where they actually spell it out, like how it sounds.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do in some places on Slack and whatever.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Alex is here with us in the studio within Scottsdale, even though her her venture firm is in Denver. So Alex, how you like in Phoenix?
I love it. I think it snowed a little bit where I was yesterday, up in the mountains of Scottsdale. So that was not my favorite day here, but I love it. The weather's awesome. I like to mountain bike. And then it's just, I'm really enjoying the kind of entrepreneurial community. I have met a ton of people. I've been driving all over the place. It takes an hour for me to get anywhere, which is because I'm kind of way up north. But meeting a lot of interesting founders. The Startup Arizona people have been really welcoming and helpful. And, I'm already to the point in a month where I'm kind of running into people, meeting a lot of people that know each other. So it just feels like a really cool, tight-knit ecosystem.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So what do you want to talk about today?
It's a great question. I don't want
to talk about ChatGPT-3.
Oh, great. Perfect. We don't have to do that.
Yeah, don't want to talk about that at all.
It's interesting, but I keep saying, just people cannot shut up about it.
It's ridiculous, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
I think it's the ultimate parlor trick.
Yeah, it's very cool.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess my best idea is, I'm probably one of the newest. I would bet I'm the newest investor that you've talked to. So anything that doesn't require too much historical knowledge or depth of knowledge, and happy to talk about how getting into the business. This is not where I thought I would end up. I have sort of an interesting path to getting here. So happy to talk about that.
Yeah, no, I do want to talk about that. Everyone loves the kind of the path to venture capital story. I do want to talk about your time at Harvard.
Yeah, sure.
When you say Harvard, do you put your nose up in the air?
Oh, not at all. In fact, I was, that's probably the biggest reason why I needed to get out of there, because I think I don't really fit into that kind of culture.
If I went to Harvard, I would tell anybody that would listen that I went to Harvard.
Yeah, totally. Well, and I didn't even go to Harvard. I went to Wellesley, and then which is a small liberal arts college outside of Boston. It's one of the few remaining women's colleges. So it was one of the 7 sister schools.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I loved it. It was awesome. Incredible environment and incredible alumni community. I think because there's this, we've moved away from the term sisterhood, but there's this incredible community by just having women coming together. And so incredibly supportive, awesome experience. And then out of that, my first job was at the Harvard Business School. I had studied political science and economics and kind of really was interested in international economic development. I thought I'd work for a nonprofit or in public policy. Always been super impact oriented, focused on economic justice and, how do we create opportunity for people? And I thought the government and nonprofits is the obvious path and answer there. So
Is it?
Well, just wait for my story. I'll give you the whole spiel.
Sorry, I interrupt you.
No worries.
Okay.
So I got this job right out of school, working for a guy named Michael Porter at the Harvard Business School. Mm-hmm. I was hired. I think, the number one job they had in mind for me was to refill the printers and make sure everything was stocked. I was an office assistant. So really, I was just trying to get some early experience working in a nonprofit or just something that I thought would translate to my first real job in a nonprofit. And I didn't know that much about, I knew he had some interesting work. He's done some, he's well known for his work. He's kind of a strategy guru guy, but he also has this whole body of work around economic development. And so I was just trying to build up some skills that were actually marketable coming out of a liberal arts education. And over time, I got really integrated into his work and really super interested in the research he was doing. And actually, it's kind of funny how that happened. So Michael Porter.
So he was an academic.
He's an academic.
And he's a well-published academic.
Really well-published. In fact,
so is he like Scott Galloway good?
He is the most cited business writer of all time.
Okay, I'm going to write this down.
In fact, if you were to do some Google Scholar analysis, he is one of the top 5 most cited, thinkers of all time.
Interesting.
He's written something like 20 books.
And you work directly underneath him. Yeah,
I worked really super closely with him for 8 years. And I never thought I was going to spend 8 years there. But I just got to know his work really well, became closer to him, moved on to the research side of things pretty quickly. That's not what I was hired to do. But, what happened is Michael, he's old school, and he would do a lot of his editing of his books and whatever he was working on by hand. And so my first job out of college, I did all kinds of things around the office. And then he would have me take his handwritten edits and type them into the computer. And so I read for that first year that I did that, I read everything he did. He has terrible handwriting. So to kind of get better at that, I read other things that he had written. I just got to know his style and know his work. And then he realized, I was actually, really good at kind of understanding his thinking, where he was going, making corrections for him. So he brought me onto the research side of things. I had a great mentor there, this woman who had just come out of Wharton and took me under her wing, really learned, his work, started writing case studies with him, eventually moved more. He has a consulting side of what he does. He works with a lot of, Fortune 500 companies, big, large corporations.
So I'm thinking of him like
strategy work.
What's the guy? Who's the guy I'm thinking about? The big management consulting guy, Drucker.
Yeah.
Is he like that guy?
Totally. Yeah. In that vein, for sure. He is, no longer teaching, but he was teaching at HBS, primarily executive education. He had a program that he taught with the dean and a couple of other people that not every, but a huge percentage of the newly appointed CEOs of, multi-billion-dollar businesses would come through this new CEO program where they would,
Oh, cool.
It was very cool, incredible, network there.
So what was the best piece of advice that Michael Porter gave you?
He has a lot of famous quotes that I still dredge out all the time. I think probably my favorite is that, strategies, choosing what not to do. I think his and something along the lines of if you're not disappointing some people, you don't have a strategy is the other one.
I like that.
Yeah, he's an incredible speaker and storyteller. So he has, I'll send you some videos because he has riffs on that are just, really super good and entertaining, and kind of case studies from past consulting that he's done. So anyway, I over time started working not just on kind of his strategy work, but he has this whole body of work around what he calls creating shared value. And this is what got me super excited and got me to stay in that role for a while and kind of advance it. By the end of my time there, I was managing his kind of a think tank within HBS. So I was managing his research team at that. It's called the Institute for Strategy and Competitiveness. Managing a team, helping him on consulting projects, both strategy, but this creating shared value work, which the idea there, which isn't new at all now, but when he was writing about this back in the kind of mid 2000s, early, I think he published this article called Creating Shared Value in 2011, is that, there is absolutely no, that profit and purpose are not in conflict. They're highly synergistic. And a lot of our greatest opportunities, business opportunities, are solving, social needs. Those are unmet needs that the only scalable way to solve it is through, business, through a scalable, profitable business model. Government, unfortunately, has failed to solve a lot of these problems. Nonprofits just don't have kind of the scalable, without profit, it's just never.
You can't build any infrastructure.
You can't. It's never going to reach the scale that we need to really make a huge difference. And so I spent a lot of my time with him digging into that, looking at examples of companies, primarily big companies, but also startups that are, have adopted this perspective, are developed, and he has a framework for how you think about the opportunities that create shared value, kind of, looking at the products, the opportunities to reduce waste and be more efficient and train people in your value chain. And then kind of in your community, in the communities where you operate, things you can do that are highly synergistic with building business value. So, I got really into that way of thinking, knew that whatever I did next was going to be related to social impact, social entrepreneurship. Eventually, the pandemic hit, and that gave me an opportunity to think about what's next. And I actually had been commuting between New York and Boston. I was living in New York because my wife had gotten a great job there. And we fled, came out to Boulder. And I realized, I thought I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I was like, I got to get a lot closer to the action. I'd been helping write articles and case studies and way up here. And I wanted to get, many steps closer to that impact that I thought was, so important, the only way we're going to change the world through social entrepreneurship. So I thought I was going to start a company. I joined the MBA program at CU because I even though I'd worked at Harvard for so long, I had never taken that time off to go and get an MBA. And I realized that I actually don't probably have the skills that I need. Some of the core, like how to do the books and, or build a financial model that I would actually need to run a company. So I took that time to kind of incubate it and ended up through that. I joined a startup. I worked for Techstars. I kind of took that time to explore and then found my way into venture. I was on the student venture fund at CU and just realized that this is actually a good match for my skills from someone that has spent a lot of time, writing memos and making PowerPoints. And two, I just think venture is an incredible, like kind of, noble profession where you're really helping create value in the world. So was lucky enough to find my way into that. Got an internship with Access Ventures. And then I did a good enough job that they hired me. So
awesome.
Yeah. So it's the long story. And, you got a whole background on sort of Michael Porter, who is a really brilliant, interesting person. So if you don't know much about him, you should also.
No, I'm gonna definitely dig up some articles and stuff. So like now that you've been working with earlier stage companies, you've seen kind of, the grit and the basically all the action and activities that are needed to create value within a small company. And then you've seen it from an academic perspective, right? Mm-hmm. And where, academics, I think there's someone to learn from everything, right? But how do you bridge that, I guess the novelty of those frameworks and those templates into an early stage company?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And, I'm grateful that I had the experience of joining a really early stage startup and kind of, I think that was something that was just, I knew was critical because that's, I think I identified a huge gap, right? There's a big difference between an academic exercise in an exercise, a strategy exercise in a, Fortune 100 company where you have an entire corporate strategy team and a team of consultants coming in that can spend hundreds of hours buying data, pulling, analyzing that data, putting it into these kind of frameworks and models. And, I think I was maybe a little bit naive in some ways about, what the right approach would be in a startup. I think a lot of the same principles apply, right? You just have to...
There's just no time, right?
Exactly.
There's no time and there's no money, right?
Yeah. But I think you can do lighter weight versions,
sure. Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of tools that have been put out specifically to kind of do that, leverage the best of like the lean canvas and stuff. Mm-hmm. I think those are super worthwhile because it's, a lot of the times founders have so much of that knowledge in their head, right? Mm-hmm. And it's just, frameworks are just ways to help you organize that knowledge and put it all down on paper. I know founder I know is doing a 5 forces exercise. That's kind of Michael's his big hit was the 5 forces, but they're thinking about a lot of those dynamics, right? Kind of what is, how do I capture value in this industry and what, how do I acquire power versus my customers and my suppliers? And, so they might do something really lightweight and a lot of that can be done in, kind of the lean canvas or some kind of more condensed version. But I still think that, going through that exercise of putting it to paper and sometimes that's done in like the pitch deck, right? Is still really helpful. And I'm always really impressed when I meet a founder, and the context that I'm meeting them is typically the pitch, right? Which is when they're forced to take everything from their head about the vision of this company and put it down to paper if they haven't done that before. And I'm looking at, seed stage, Series A companies. I'm always really impressed when, I ask some of these, given my background, I always really like to dig into the market and the competition and the distribution, the kind of the channels, the partnerships. And, those aren't in their kind of core deck, but occasionally, a founder, they'll say, oh, I've got a slide for that. Let me go pull that out of the appendix. And I've really thought this through. And even if they, I think it's at that early stage, they can recognize that they don't know yet necessarily everything, but they're thinking about all the right things. And they thought it was important enough to put it down onto paper.
Or maybe that was an internal slide.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Totally.
It's not something that, they thought an investor would care about.
Yeah, totally.
So as an associate or a senior associate, someone told me really once that if, one of the best things to, if you're not a person that can self-structure, then getting an early stage venture is not a job for you, because there is very much a mentorship.
Totally. So
game.
An apprenticeship.
Yeah, exactly. So how do you organize your day?
Yeah. Ooh, that's a great question. And in fact, someone else told me that, they think that the biggest driver of, or like the, time management is the biggest driver of success in venture. And I like that. Yeah. I thought I noted it because I think it's so true. And I'm finding that to be true. Definitely. I have, I guess, 3 main jobs, right? Sourcing, and these are the jobs of venture: sourcing deals, doing due diligence. So I guess I'll count those as 2 separate, and then working with portfolio companies. I don't really spend any time fundraising, which I feel very lucky about, because it allows me to do these other things better. Hopefully in the future, that'll become part of my job. And then I guess the other thing that I do, which is a part of the deal sourcing, is spending a lot of time, and given my background, this is what I really like, digging into markets, trying to do some market mapping, and using that as a source of deal flow. I wish that I could say I had a more clear structure to my day, that I do the same thing all the time, but I assume this is similar for everyone. It's kind of dictated by the founders, right? I will, move things around so that I can talk to a founder that I want to talk to, and prioritize that probably above everything else. But so, in the morning, I try to spend some time getting organized, trying to keep up with emails that need to be replied to. Then I have a lot of meetings between founders, and I meet with a lot of other investors, trying to, you're the number one expert I know at this, but trying to just share deals, be helpful, talk about deals that we're looking at, build relationships to help out our companies for future rounds. And then typically, I don't think this is good practice. I do my diligence mostly toward the end of the day, into the evenings, might bleed over into the weekend, because I know that that's the part I like doing the most. So I try and, save that for when I just...
It's a little treat at the end.
Yeah, exactly. And I know it's stuff that needs to get done. So, I try and fill the top of the funnel in the, first half of the day, and then kind of process the funnel toward the end of the day. I don't know. That's what I do. I don't know if that's right at all. I would love to hear what you do. And
this is my show, Alex. I ask the questions. You can't ask me any questions. I think everyone just has a cadence, right? Of they think of what they need to do, and it's kind of a schedule, and you build it, and hopefully it coincides. I mean, you have partners. I don't have partners, right? So, generally speaking, it's kind of what I want. But in the beginning of the year, I do have targets and I do have goals, and I get very clear about them, because if not, I love time management is the biggest success. I think that's absolutely true.
Yeah,
you can spend so much time going down roads that lead to nowhere. I remember my first year starting off on my own. I was like, well, I just need to talk to everybody. And what I did was I built a really big pipeline of shitty companies,
Yeah.
and so I would love to talk. You said this phrase and this word, and we've talked about it in private before, but I'd love to kind of get your thoughts about it on the air, of this concept of market mapping, right? And thematic investing, and what is that, and how do you do it?
Right. Well, I'm, absolutely not the expert, but I'm trying to figure it out. I think, given my background, one, just with kind of doing research and analysis and kind of academic exercises, and also with, working for so long with this person whose, mantra is just focus and strategy. I think I really am drawn toward thematic or thesis-driven investing. I would say that right now I'm kind of in the thematic space and not yet to the thesis driven. I think to get to the thesis, you have to go through a whole process and spend some time in a theme and really get to the point where you.
I think that's right. I think like the thesis is really like what is the site of the gun you're looking through, and like, does the company fit within the site, and the theme is the target, right? Yeah,
exactly. And I hope to get to a more thesis driven approach. And with that said, Access has historically been, our kind of theme and approach historically has been regional, right? So this is just background. I'll answer your question the best that I can. Historically, we've been regional investors. We started out 20-something years ago. Our founders came from the Bay Area to Colorado because they saw an opportunity and an underserved capital market that was really growing like crazy. We've, I think, done a great job in Colorado, and we've developed just because of the nature of venture. I think you find some success in an area and you double down there, and so we've kind of had some themes emerge, and those are cybersecurity. We've made some great investments there. Continue to look at a ton of cyber, kind of HR tech or human capital management broadly is another one. We have some great HR tech companies in our portfolio right now. And then, there's a few others. We look at some marketplaces. I'm probably forgetting one, but those are big ones. And then, but because we've been regionally focused, we're also very opportunistic generalist. We like to know every deal happening in Colorado. So we really look at anything in software. While we are taking a more thematic approach because we have more, interest in doing that and in capacity, and I think we see value in it, we also see a lot of value in continuing to just, know every single deal that happens in Colorado and then, the mountain region more broadly. While I like a thematic approach, that's not totally, the strategy of Access. The way I'm going about it, and this comes from, consulting work that I did with Michael. I think you have to start by just really getting a handle on macros and understanding areas where you think there are waves that you can ride, right? And I think we've talked about, and some of these that I'm focused on in kind of the future of workspace. There's obviously a whole variety of things that I could choose to focus on. I've kind of picked the really broad category of future of work. And there's a lot of sub segments in between that. So I've started just doing a lot of reading, kind of trying to understand like what are the big themes and trends in terms of the way, the demographic changes. You could do. There's all kinds of frameworks around this. You could do a little pestle, or and I haven't done that in.
What'd you say that was?
A pestle, like political, economic, social, technological, legal, whatever, environmental. So you can use something like that as kind of a high level guide, and just try to understand what are some of the big drivers of change and drivers of changing needs. And that's really what it comes down to, is trying to understand, how are the needs of society and businesses and customers changing over time, and kind of keep that in mind. And really, in our job, paying a lot of attention to technological changes. What are the big technologies that you think are going to impact this theme? So, there's so many. It's like generative AI is a huge one right now.
Oh God, we covered this. We can't talk about ChatGPT.
There's, AI in general. It's having, it's opening up potential across so many areas. Video in education over the past, however several years has been a big one. There's a bunch, but just really focusing in on what are those big technologies that you think are going to be impactful. And then, also given my background, the other piece that I do is it's just like case studies, right? I'm trying to go out and find and map out. And there's some of these, you can go on the internet and find a start of like, here's 100 companies mapped out into the HR tech space and with some buckets around it. And that's a good place to start. Like you have to just look at a ton of companies and find a way to, keep track of them and in a way that you're able to draw insights out of. So, and look for patterns, kind of drill into like, okay, so what's the technological approach here, the innovation, what's the business model, kind of what's the who are they serving, specifically, what's the need? And so I don't know if this is a good approach or not, but
this is gold, Alex. I'm literally taking notes so I can just become better. So,
well, that's nice. So, I just try to build up, and because we are short on time in this, it's not an academic exercise. I'm building up my own database where I'm doing it in Airtable, and I kind of develop a taxonomy for how I think about the different approaches I'm seeing across those categories.
Right. And you can't do it until you write it down.
Totally. And I change it constantly. That's why I like Airtable, because I'll develop a taxonomy within corporate learning business models. And then I'll realize, that's not quite right. And I can go back and adjust it. And just the more companies you see, the more
you're putting your brain in Airtable.
Yeah, exactly. And I have to take notes. Otherwise it's just a floating mess of a market.
And how do you take notes? I just bought a book about taking notes. I haven't read it yet, but like, how do you think about note taking?
Well, I do it in different ways, and I'm far from perfect. But I use Evernote for just every conversation. I can type without it even, with just what I'm hearing, type it. And I like to do that because I like to just have records of things. So if I'm having a conversation, I take pretty detailed notes, but then you have to pull out insights, right? And put them somewhere.
So that's what I'm wondering. How do you, it's not the technology. The technology is there. It's like, how do you, I write down notes and I'll look at this and I'll be like, I don't understand what I just wrote down. I just wrote down words.
Yeah.
And,
I have a PowerPoint deck going on kind of the different markets that I'm looking at. And I'll say a new insight comes out, I'll create a new slide, right? Or a new really interesting company that I want to do, kind of have more of a in-depth understanding of, an in-depth kind of case study. I'll create a slide on that. And then
interesting. Okay.
Over time, you can shuffle it around and kind of, turn it into something. But right now it's super messy. I wouldn't show it to anyone at the moment. But you just, you have to just constantly force yourself to kind of pull out the insights into something that's a little bit more synthesized. The other thing I do is, I write a lot of memos, even though we use them internally. I use them to just inform the rest of my team around how I'm thinking about things. And then sections of that are reusable, and I can get pulled into this kind of, big running PowerPoint that I have on a market. So a lot of what it's just when you start to look at companies in the same space, that's how you build the market map, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you're every company I look at, and the deeper I dig in, like if we're, the whole goal of this is to identify interesting companies in a space that is underserved, right? I'm looking a lot recently at the learning market. I think there's huge opportunities, so many dollars. We've talked about upskilling.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a huge need, a big gap between kind of what the education system is producing and the skills that are needed today.
Totally.
And it's only, I think, accelerating that gap. It's an unsolved problem, but there's so much money going into it. So many players. It's really a complex market.
So where's the noise? I mean, I looked at looking at waves and like, what are the leading and the lagging indicators of the waves that you talked about? And I think the lagging indicator is see where venture dollars are going.
Yeah,
right.
Totally.
But it's like, that's when you're walking into a really noisy space. Yeah. And you're riding a hype. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Another thing that I've thought about doing is really just sharpening, because I'm more of a people person than an academic. Right. So I get a lot from conversations. So sharpening the network with operators and just, and that seems to be very helpful. But then eventually you run out of operators to talk to.
Totally. Yeah. That's a big part of my process too, is just reaching out to people in the space and getting those interviews, which, is also something you do to write a case study or do consulting work. It's very, very similar process.
What I'm doing right now is I'm just looking for like the infectious wound. Like, where's the pain?
Yeah.
Like in the industry. Yeah. And just run towards like the center of the pain and then see what, who else is around it. Yeah.
That's a really good perspective. I think, and I think the best way to do that, like talking to operators, talking to, in this case, learning leaders, CHROs, is the best way to do it, and is also what all of these entrepreneurs are and or should be doing too. So that's another great place of learning. I try and talk to as many companies as possible in this theme, even if they're not necessarily at our sweet spot for stage, or like, I'm always learning from these founders.
Well, you have to talk up market, right? Because you have to know what they're doing.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I find that incredibly helpful.
Cool. Well, right on. Well, I think that's all the time we got. You're a natural at this.
Wow, that was quick. Okay, less painful than I thought.
I mean, we've been going for 2 hours. I can't believe how long this is, like the longest podcast we've had.
Man, well, I appreciate it. I was very outside my comfort zone, but
I've always had. I mean, I haven't been doing this for as long as your partners. That's for sure. I mean, they've got a lot of experience and mileage. But, ever since I've, started, I've always really targeted talking to the associate level people at firms just because they work harder, period.
Yeah.
And it's, they're in it. And, and there's just so much to like, does this make sense? Right.
Yeah.
And when you're looking at these opportunities, it's like, yes. I mean, I've just seen like this, especially in later stage venture, just people just kind of, like just groupthink, and no one's just stepping back and being like, this doesn't make sense at all.
Yeah. And I've really appreciated there's a great, especially in, the mountain region in general, there was an emerging VC conference that
cool.
Next Frontier put together. And it was just awesome to get kind of the peer mentorship of people that are new in this space and thinking a little bit differently has been incredible.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. So a couple canned questions.
Okay.
Yeah. Cool. Best book you've ever read?
Ooh. I like fiction and novels and poetry. I'm a big... I'm a big fan of Raymond Carver short stories, which probably tells you, if you should read some of them, tells you some about my personality. I like kind of depressing, middle of America kind of, sort of where I grew up. I like to feel things.
You like to feel the feels. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I could probably give you some business book recommendations that I love too, but yeah.
Okay. And then best piece of business advice you've ever received?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, and this will resonate with you and kind of your intro to the show, just focusing at all times on value. And this comes from, Michael Porter's very, very focused on value. Like, how do you create do things at a higher quality at a lower cost, and just make that your guiding star.
Boom. Right?
Like that's all there is.
Margin.
Right?
Yeah. How do we create more margin?
Yeah, totally. And by doing that, you're gonna, find some really interesting, you're gonna serve people, find really interesting business models, and that's just always the North Star.
Absolutely. Everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. We drop an episode every Tuesday on all your favorite podcasting platforms, YouTube, Spotify, and Apple. If you like it, please subscribe, tell a friend, cancel me, do whatever. I'll talk to you later. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you for tuning in to the Capital Stack Podcast. Make sure to share this with someone you know that can benefit from this content. Remember to support this show by rating, reviewing, and subscribing. David Paul is the founder and general partner at DWP Capital. All opinions expressed by David and podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinion of DWP Capital. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon for decisions. David and guests may maintain positions in the securities discussed on this podcast.